Good morning, and thank you all for being here. Each year, an estimated $3 billion are stolen, defrauded from millions of American seniors through grandparents' scams, fake prizes, even threats. Criminals prey on vulnerable Americans, including our seniors, to steal their hard-earned savings, often a lifetime of savings, and their peace of mind. And this threat seems to be growing. We think there's no doubt of it. The Senate Aging Committee's fraud hotline received twice as many reports in 2016 as they did in 2015. The rise of new technologies has made it easier for criminals to coordinate their efforts and perpetrate their crimes. But President Trump has directed us to reduce crime in America, and that includes going after despicable con artists. We will not let this crime continue to rise. Last month, the department ordered each of our 94 United States attorneys across the country to designate an elder justice coordinator who will customize our strategy to protect the seniors in their districts. This will ensure even greater cooperation between the Department of Justice and our law enforcement partners. The Trump administration is forming unprecedented law enforcement partnerships around the country and indeed around the world. These partnerships are already bearing fruit. Today, the department is announcing the largest elder fraud enforcement action in our nation's history. With the help of our partners at all levels of government and in the private sector, we have charged more than 200 defendants for committing elder fraud schemes and have brought civil actions against dozens more. These defendants allegedly defrauded more than 1 million Americans of more than $500 million. In the past month alone, the Department's Consumer Protection Branch and our United States Attorney's offices have filed cases against more than 40 defendants. These 40 defendants are responsible for a majority of those 1 million victims I mentioned. And these cases include charges against the transnational criminal organizations highlighted on the map that we've displayed. A large percentage of these cases are transnational. Just yesterday, the Postal Inspection Service executed 14 search warrants across America. The Department of Justice's Consumer Protection Branch and our U.S. attorneys are working closely with these inspectors on these investigations. And as we speak, our partners with the Vancouver, Canada Police Department are executing dozens of search warrants as part of their enforcement actions. These warrants are being carried out against members of transnational criminal organizations that have allegedly defrauded tens of thousands of American people all over the world. And so, I want to thank our Postal Inspection Service, the FBI, its Los Angeles field office, the Federal Trade Commission and its Consumer Sentinel database, and the Vancouver Police Department, the United States Attorney's offices in the Eastern District of New York and the Southern District of Iowa, our elder justice coordinators, and all of our state, local, and international partners who helped make this historic achievement possible. Thank you to Derek Smith, Kansas Attorney General and President of the National Association of Attorneys General, for participating in this action and representing our state attorneys general who play a vital role in this effort and often are leaders themselves in these efforts. And thank you to the Senate Special Committee on Aging, especially my good friends Senator Grassley and Collins. I just got off the phone with Senator Collins. Susan has been working on this for a number of years and we've been talking about it for some time. They have a special passion for the issue and have helped raise awareness about it, and awareness is important. I also want to thank Deborah Cox Rouse, Director of Senior Corps, the federal agency that coordinates the work of hundreds of thousands of senior citizen volunteers around the country. They spread the word of the dangers from some of these phone calls. Senior Corps has helped get the word out about these fraud schemes. That's why I hope that no victim of fraud feels ashamed. This can happen to anyone. Several members of my staff have told me about their grandparents being targeted by these fraudsters. I mean, in the last week, we had 4 people on our staff talk about their grandparents being approached and solicited for fraudulent schemes. One of my senior staff was in a meeting with me this week when she got a call from her distraught grandmother who just received a call from a fraudster saying she was in jail and they needed money to get her out of jail. So we need to spread the word about this. So please, if you or someone you know was victimized by an elder fraud scheme, report it to the Federal Trade Commission. We will be following up on those reports. It might just give us the tip we need to put criminals in jail and to protect other seniors who could be victimized. The Federal Trade Commission website is available and people should use it. This Department of Justice is going to increase and sustain our work to prosecute fraudsters wherever they may be. The loss of the pain, the suffering these criminals inflict on our good and trusting seniors must never be tolerated. We are joined here today by several Americans who have had the courage to step forward and share their stories of being victimized by fraudsters. They've come a long way to be here. I want to thank them for that and for sharing their experiences and insights. We'll hear one of those stories now from Angela Stonkick of Houston, Texas. Angela, would you please share with us of the experience that you've had?
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Angela Stonkick. I'm very grateful and honored to be here today. I'm here because my grandmother was a victim of elder fraud. Her name was Marjorie Jones. My family and I loved her very much. She had a heart of gold, and she was everything that you would expect a grandmother to be. My grandmother was solicited nonstop by a fraudster who convinced her to invest in a phony investment scheme. She was told that she had won prizes in a sweepstakes, and all she had to do was send in money to cover taxes and fees. The calls to her home were relentless. My grandmother ultimately lost all of her money to these people, to the point where she had to take out a reverse mortgage on her home. She cashed out all of her life insurance. She had to borrow money from family members. This was not my grandmother. It was very out of character for her to give money this way. When she realized that she had been defrauded, she was extremely devastated. She felt humiliated, and she had literally lost everything. She died with $69 in her bank account. It was so much for her. It was so much to bear. So much so, and it pains me to say this, but she took her life because of this incident. The events leading to my grandmother's death have scarred my family and have left us all in shock. The pain and the loss from her tragic death surrounds us all daily. And to this day, it's incredibly difficult circumstances for us to accept. And it's hard to imagine for anyone that a loved one could commit suicide, but my grandmother did. Because these individuals preyed on her and on her good heart. What should have been some of the best years in the last chapter of her life was taken from her. She was robbed in every sense. The bottom line is, this is not a partisan issue. It's not a political issue. Every crime has a victim, and every victim needs help. In my grandmother's case, she was victimized to her death. There's no amount of money that could bring back what was taken from her. She paid ultimately with her life. If anyone is listening to this or watching, I implore them to say something to anyone. It's not too late. It's not your fault. You can call this number. It's 1-877-FTC-HELP. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Not a day goes by where my family and I don't miss my grandmother. I wish we had known how horrible the circumstances were for her in the last few months of her life. We literally found out 10 days before she died that this was happening to her. Attorney General Sessions, on behalf of my grandmother, Marjorie Jones, and my entire family, and all of the seniors across this nation that have been victims of fraud, thank you. We are in this fight together.
Thank you, Angela. That has happened far too often in this country. It is a despicable crime these people are doing. They laugh about their ability to defraud people. They're the kind of people that we need to be more effective in targeting. These are difficult cases often to make. And the defendants who are perpetrating it are often international and don't live in the United States. But we've proven through this work and the leadership we're putting together, and states' attorney generals have done, that progress can be made, and we intend to make more. Do we have Guy?
Thank you, Attorney General Sessions. Winners. That's what a lot of the people who answered these solicitations in the mail thought they were, but they're not. They're victims. Victims of scams that postal inspectors have seen and investigated for decades. The letters come in attention-grabbing envelopes designed to lead a person to believe that they actually won. However, no prize is ever delivered. No prize ever existed. The winning letter was one of millions of identical solicitations mailed to hundreds of thousands of victims around the world. Now, all the winner has to do to claim the prize is pay a processing fee or a small amount for taxes. Most individuals, once they've mailed in a small fee and received nothing in return, they soon realize they've been scammed. But some, especially our older Americans, they keep believing they won and they keep sending money. The scammer then takes the relationship to the next level, increasing his or her grip on the victim while emotionally isolating them from their friends and family. Oftentimes, victims are told not to share news about their winnings with their families, at least not until they receive their big check. Once the scammer starts, the demands are relentless. As Attorney General Sessions said, these fraudsters don't limit themselves to just lies anymore. Their efforts to keep victims in line become increasingly ruthless. They don't hesitate to threaten, coerce, or resort to psychological intimidation. They victimize our citizens by robbing them of their money and shattering their sense of financial well-being, stealing their dignity and their image of self-worth. These scams are not new to us in the Postal Inspection Service. In fact, some of these same operators we encountered almost 20 years ago are back, but so are we. Over the past week, more than 100 postal inspectors around the country executed search warrants in 14 locations that some of these same operators have run scams for years. We know from prior similar investigations that these enforcement actions have an immediate impact. 2 years ago, I reported from this very podium how we shut down one mass marketing scheme with a civil injunction. Postal inspectors stopped approximately 40,000 victim responses from getting to the fraudsters, immediately ending their continued victimization. In addition, we were able to return over $215,000 to over 5,700 individuals who sent cash. This time, we're not only going after the fraudsters, we're going after the enablers as well. No fraud scheme is successful without a well-written and persuasive solicitation. A Montana writer who had been creating solicitations for every fraudster in the sweepstakes industry for more than 20 years has been charged. Once written, the solicitation needs to be printed. We filed a complaint against a Las Vegas printer that was well aware that what they were printing was designed to be used in deceptive mailings and to deceive consumers into paying a fee and believing they had already won a valuable prize. The next step for the scammers is to obtain a mailing list. 2 list brokers recently pled guilty to conspiracy to commit mail fraud for providing mailing lists to mailers engaged in deceptive sweepstakes and prize schemes. And then, of course, there's the mailers. They pled guilty to conspiracy to commit mail fraud. Millions of victims around the world fall for these scams. Many of the same victims are lured into buying these schemes repeatedly, and the losses are staggering. More than $30 million a month in the United States, and globally it's over $100 million a month. Some victims, as we've heard, have lost everything. Some have sent money to the scammers instead of paying for their rent, utilities, or medicines. Victims have become estranged from family members who tried to intervene to stop them from sending more money. Our law enforcement and civil actions are successful, but it's just part of our initiative. We believe that consumer education is the best defense against these scammers. We can't arrest all of these con artists, so prevention is truly critical. And our outreach efforts include many different campaigns like Operation Protect Veterans, a partnership we're doing with AARP, and many, many other campaigns that go on an annual basis. You can be a target, but you don't have to be a victim. That's a mantra that we use and the tip to protect yourself. So a couple of tips: don't send a payment. You don't have to pay to play a legitimate sweepstakes. And pay attention to your loved ones. Take note of mail they receive. If you notice stacks of mail of solicitations from psychics or solicitations for prizes or sweepstakes or lotteries, take action. Call the Postal Inspection Service or the FTC or visit deliveringtrust.com. These enforcement actions are a long-term commitment, and we can't do it alone. I'd certainly like to thank our partners, the Vancouver Police Department, the Dutch FIAD, the UK National Trading Standards, and U.S. Attorney Richard Donahue from the Eastern District of New York. We're all working together to protect the American public, and especially our vulnerable older Americans, and ensure their confidence in the U.S. mail. Thank you, Attorney General.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the FBI, I'm David Bowditch. And I first wanted to begin by thanking the Attorney General for his leadership on this issue. On behalf of all of us up here, I am proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with our partners up here. This is an incredibly important issue for all of us in the government, and everyone in this room has family members that could be taken advantage of through these types of schemes. As the Attorney General noted earlier, this is a serious and growing threat. Last year, the FBI opened well over 1,500 financial crimes cases. Of those, 200 of them involved elderly victims. These investigations covered a wide range of crimes, including investment frauds, such as Ponzi schemes, internet frauds, such as romance and lottery scams, mass marketing schemes, reverse mortgage scams, and outright theft by people that the victim should have been able to trust, to include their attorneys, their financial advisors, and even more egregious, their guardians and their caregivers. In one case, the FBI worked with the U.S. Postal Inspection Service. We uncovered an attorney who took funds belonging to the estate of an individual, an elderly person who had dementia. Those funds were taken and used for personal gains and lavish lifestyles. In another case, an entity purporting to help clients with their finances instead allegedly embezzled funds from clients' accounts to pay for personal expenses and lavish lifestyles. These fraudsters view our seniors as prime targets. People who have large nest eggs, many of them have sacrificed for decades to build those nest eggs. People who have excellent credit, and quite frankly, people who are not always, depending on their age, some are not that technologically savvy. And they know elderly victims often do not report being victimized because they don't know where to turn. Many of them feel guilty or embarrassed, or because they don't even realize that they're being scammed. While criminals see the elderly as trusting people with money, we see them as our national treasures. The elderly are the cornerstone of this country. Many of them sacrificed for their families. They sacrificed for their nations, yet these people prey on them. Many of them are our parents and our grandparents. This is a personal issue. It should be to everyone in this room, and I know it is. We understand how devastating a fraudulent scheme against elderly victims can be, not just financially, but emotionally, mentally, and quite frankly, even physically. And it's often traumatizing for their caregivers who have to pick up the pieces later. So the FBI wants to make it as easy as possible for our seniors and for those who care for them to report possible victimization. If any person believes they are the victim of or have knowledge of fraud activity involving an elderly person, regardless of the loss amount, they should report it. Now, I'm here representing the FBI, so I'm going to give you 3 ways you can report it to us. The Attorney General and my predecessors also gave you other avenues. It is not a competition. What we do want is for people to report it. We obviously work together because it's for the good of our nation. There are 3 ways to file. If folks choose to file it to the FBI, number 1 is to walk into your local field office. Number 2 would be to call in to 1-800-CALL-FBI, or finally, they can lodge a complaint online at the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, which is addressed at www.ic3.gov. Each of our FBI field offices also has victim specialists that work with our agents and our investigators across the country with victims of crime, and they are very well trained to work with a variety of types of victims, and they will help both the caregivers and the victims if necessary. Protecting the elderly is a priority of the Department of Justice. This FBI remains committed to working with our partners to investigate those who take advantage of them for their own personal gain. Thank you.
Good morning. I want to thank Attorney General Sessions and the Department of Justice for their leadership on this important initiative aimed at protecting older Americans from fraud. I also want to thank the FBI, the United States Postal Inspection Service, and Attorney General Derek Schmidt. This elder fraud sweep is just the latest example of the effective coordination that goes on every day between the FTC and our law enforcement partners. By working together, we can effectively tackle a broad range of consumer protection issues across the country and amplify our impact. During my tenure as the acting chairman of the FTC, I have emphasized the importance of protecting older Americans. Every one of our law enforcement cases and policy initiatives affects them. Our data shows that although older consumers are not more likely to be victims of fraud, when they are victimized, they suffer greater dollar losses. And certain scams either target seniors or disproportionately affect them, such as sweepstakes and prize promotions, technical support scams, and charitable donation frauds. As part of today's event, I'm pleased to announce 2 recent FTC cases that stopped fraud directed at older Americans. Our case against NextGen Inc., which we brought with the Missouri Attorney General, involves allegations that defendants sent mailers telling consumers that they had won $1 million prize, but that they had to pay a processing fee and answer a few simple math questions. In reality, defendants not only charged multiple fees, they never awarded consumers the promised prize. We allege that this scheme extracted more than $110 million from consumers, many of whom are seniors. In another case, FTC versus Genius Technologies, the defendants aided scammers who impersonated well-known technology companies and tricked consumers into paying exorbitant fees for security software, but instead delivered useless products and stole people's tax documents. So if you know, or if you or someone you know has seen or experienced fraud, please report it to the FTC at ftc.gov/complaint or call our hotline 877-FTC-HELP. Now, while law enforcement to stop scams is an important way to safeguard seniors from fraud, it's equally important to arm older Americans with the information they need to protect themselves from falling for scams in the first place. Using our website at the FTC, the media, and partnerships, as you see before you, the FTC provides consumer education to tens of millions of people each year. We deliver actionable, practical, up-to-date, plain language materials on dozens of issues. Our centerpiece for protecting older Americans is Pass It On, an innovative education effort aimed at enlisting active older adults in the fight against fraud. Pass It On gives them information they can pass on to family and friends. And Pass It On reinforces what mature Americans already know about scams and encourages them to share their experience and knowledge with others. The topics include tech support and other imposter scams, and frauds involving healthcare, identity theft, charities, and prize and sweepstakes promotions. The Pass It On materials are available at www.ftc.gov/passiton. And just to conclude, I want to reiterate that the FTC remains committed to protecting older Americans from fraud and will continue to employ all of the agency's resources to tackle this important issue. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for being here today. I'm Derek Schmidt. I'm the Attorney General for the state of Kansas and currently the President of our National Association of Attorneys General, which includes all 56 of us, the states plus the territories in D.C. General Sessions, thank you for convening this opportunity to talk today about the important work that not only these federal agencies, but a panoply of state and local agencies around the country do every day. What perhaps is obvious today, but it's obvious to us every day, is that we don't do it alone. We look at these cases when they come in, usually to us, in the form of an individual complaint. In my case, a Kansan who has been harmed or thinks they've been wronged, who reports something to a local police department, and they say that's really something the AG's office is better equipped to look at, and they call us. Or a Kansan who thinks they've been wronged, they've been ripped off in some type of senior scam, and they report it directly to us. We do a lot of consumer protection and elder fraud work in our office. It's something we focused on boosting. Footnote on that, one of the things we've done in our state, which I would highlight, sometimes it can be a bit confusing if you're a senior and you've been ripped off and you're alone in your living room and you're embarrassed and you don't quite know who to turn to, and gosh, you're out there looking at the Attorney General's office or the Department of Justice or the FTC and the website and the phone numbers, and it's intimidating. We scrapped all that in Kansas, just within our borders, and developed what some smiled at, our In Your Corner Kansas program. All you got to do is remember, if you've been ripped off, especially if you're a senior, the AG's office in Kansas is in your corner. We got a website, we got a phone number. Call us, we'll play traffic cop, we'll get you hooked up with the right federal authorities, with the right local authorities, or we'll do the case if we can. A couple of points just from the state and local perspective. Number one, I don't think it's been touched on here today. Why now? I mean, why are we having this conversation now? From our standpoint at the National Association of Attorneys General, we chose the subject matter this year to focus on elder abuse. It's a cross-cutting issue, doesn't respect geographical lines, urban, rural, Democrat, Republican. It's something we all agree on and focus on. And the demographic numbers are compelling. Over the last century and change, from about the dawn of the 20th century, the number of Americans over the age of 65 has grown by about tenfold. We're living longer. That's a good news story. Over that same period of time, the number of Americans, the proportion of our population, has gone from about 3% to about 13% over 65. So it's not just that there are more of us, it's that there's a bigger slot of the American population in that senior bracket. And the amount of wealth on the aggregate held by folks in that age range is dramatically up. In fact, I usually say it's the largest amount of wealth ever held by a single demographic in the history of the world. I think the median wealth is somewhere in the range of $250,000 for folks in the 65 plus age bracket nationwide, obviously tremendously uneven. So all of that is a recipe for bad guys who want easy money to target a particular population, and the targets of opportunity are greater than they've ever been before. So that's why we're focused on it. It's why state AGs are focused on it. We are so grateful for this opportunity to highlight our ongoing partnership with our federal partners. And I'll just close by making this point. As I said before, usually these reach us sort of at the grassroots level by a single person with a single loss who says, can you help? We don't know at that point whether this is a one-off circumstance where an individual has been ripped off, or whether this is part of a large international criminal enterprise with thousands of victims that are involved. So we take them in and deal with them retail. Sometimes a case grows very large and we engage our federal partners, and the types of enforcement actions that Attorney General Sessions talked about that reach across oceans are what results. And sometimes we handle the matter ourselves. We actually handled an elder fraud case not long ago where the total loss was $699, not the kind of thing the state AG's office normally focuses on. But for that victim, on that complaint, that was the most important loss that any law enforcement agency in the country was facing at any given time. So remember, the old-fashioned things still work. We're doing the big international criminal stuff with our federal partners. We're also dealing with door-to-door crooks. We're dealing with fiduciary fraud of people ripping off old people through legal documents. All the old-fashioned scams still work. Thank you, General, for doing this.
Thank you.
We have time for just a few for the Attorney General. Pete?
Mr. Attorney General, other than the bump stock initiative rulemaking, are there other things that the Justice Department is considering changes in response to the school shootings?
Yes, we're looking at a number of things, and in fact, I'm departing in just a few minutes to go to the White House. We're meeting with law enforcement officials to discuss these and related issues. We're at a point where the President's made clear he wants to think this through and to make sure that we do everything we can reasonably do to push back against this kind of violence.
Can you give us any examples of what you're considering?
I'll let the President and the meeting speak for itself when we break up today.
General, looking at some FBI data on active shootings, in the early 2000s we were averaging about 10. So now, what do you think is causing the number of active shootings to increase, and what can we do about it right now, given the horror that we saw last week?
We are conducting right now through the Department of Justice programs a very substantial number of education, criminal, mental illness surveys around the country, and we're not prepared to release that information, but it's been ongoing for several years now. Some of them have not completed yet, but we need the best data possible. I'm not prepared to say to you today what that is, but one of the things we need to do is examine existing research that's been going on for years. Some sophisticated programs have already been done, and then we need to see what gaps are existing in research sets more.
Mr. President, I'm going to pull you to get to the White House and talk about the law.
Thank you. Let me just say that this group behind you represents a powerful force against these fraudsters. The cases aren't easy. Initial losses might be small, but when you multiply that by thousands, you're talking about damage to a lot of people. And then a lot of the victims have been hammered for their entire life savings, a tragedy of monumental proportions. So we're serious about it. We want to push this forward. Attorneys Generals have always made it a priority of their offices, but we do with our interstate and international capabilities. We can be real partners for our state and local officials, and we intend to be strong partners in this effort. Thank you all.
Thank you.